Sentite?
Sì.
Ok.
Quando vuole attiva la videocamera, condivide lo schermo e la presento.
Sì. Ok, mi vedete?
Sì, perfetto. Fabiana Badolato is a graduate student at the University of Calabria. She graduated in Modern Languages and Cultures with a dissertation in literary translation entitled Light, Night, Equivalence, Corruption, Analysis of the Italian Translation of Night Walks by Charles Dickens. She currently attends the second year of the master's degree course in Modern Languages and Literatures at the University of Calabria. She's interested in postcolonial studies, translation studies, psychology, and philology. The title of our presentation today is Cultural Alterity as a Means of Inner Balance, Facing the Unknown in A Passage to India and Art of Darkness.
Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon. I'm here today to talk to you about how cultural alterity and the encounter with the unknown can enrich the self and serve as a means of inner balance. The analysis will focus on Edward Forster's A Passage to India and Joseph Conrad's Art of Darkness. Balance as a noun is defined by the Cambridge Dictionary as a state where things are of equal weight or force. From an etymological point of view, balance dates back to early 13th century scale apparatus for weighing by comparison of mass. From medieval Latin bilancia, many figurative uses of from Middle English image of the scales in the hands of personified justice, fortune, fate, etc. Thus, in the balance, for example, is an idiomatic expression which can have the meaning of at risk, in jeopardy, or danger. Balance of power is instead interpreted in geopolitical sense as distribution of forces among nations, so that one may not dominate another. This interpretation dates back to 1701. Balance as a verb during the 1570s reaches the meaning of be equal with. The meaning serve as a counterpoise to is from 1590s, and that of bring of keep in equilibrium is from 1630s. And finally, keep oneself in equilibrium is from 1833. This last meaning brings to an important correlation that between balance and equilibrium, which can be seen as the inner balance of a person. But how to reach this inner balance? Humans are living organisms, and all living organisms need to stay in a balanced state of energy to thrive. This energy is better achieved by the encounter with the other, that is, with a person or a thing that has nothing to do with what we already know. Knowledge of the unknown completes the self, and it is the final puzzle which makes clear the image of ourselves. The unknown is often attributed to darkness, a void, or a deep cave, where those who visit it do not know how to orient themselves, since they cannot see anything around them. But before a light can illuminate the surrounding space, making the visitor of the cave aware of what is around him, it is the awareness of the unknown that there is something not known yet which causes a change and enrichment in the individual. The enrichment of the individual comes before he reveals his nature, what he is. It is a moment comparable to what the French critic of translation, Jean-René Lamiral, calls déverbalisation. It consists of an intermediate phase of the translation process, which arises between the understanding, comprehension, and re-expression of the text, and it is a moment of deep psychological tension where the translator puts its dialectical memory into play and tries to live out the mode of expression of the source language and re-elaborates the message according to the methods of expression of the target language. For the translator, it is therefore a moment of contact with the unknown, represented by the foreign text, what Lamiral defines more metaphorically as il salto mortale by the title of his work. This same metaphor can explain the intermediate moment between the individual's first contact with the other and the discovery of his or her nature, a phase that can be defined as acknowledgement. Omi Baba, in his work The Location of Culture, talks about the perspective of death as a way to understand the relationship between the self and the other. And I quote, What is profoundly unresolved, even erased in the discourses of post-structuralism, is the perspective of death, through which the authenticity of identity comes to be reflected in the glassy metaphorics of the mirror and its mimetic or realistic narratives. Shifting the frame of identity from the field of vision to the space of writing interrogates the third dimension of self and other, that death perspective that cineasts call the fourth wall. End quote. The two triangles above can represent two caves. In philosophy, namely in Plato's The Republic, these concepts were illustrated using the metaphor of the sun, the analogy of the dividing line, and the allegory of the cave. In this last allegory, Socrates describes a group of people who have lived chained to a wall of a cave all their lives, facing a blank wall. The people watch shadows projected on the wall from objects passing in front of a fire behind them and give names to these shadows. The shadows are the prisoner's reality, but are not accurate representations of the real world. Three higher levels exist: the natural sciences, mathematics, geometry, and deductive logic, and the theory of forms. Socrates explains how the philosopher is like a prisoner who is freed from the cave and comes to understand that the shadows on the wall are not reality at all. A philosopher aims to understand and perceive the higher levels of reality. However, the other inmates of the cave do not even desire to leave their prison, for they know no better life. In the third chapter of the book, The Woman in the Attic, entitled The Parables of the Cave, it is possible to find the following quotation by Plato, and I quote, "Next then, I said, take the following parable of education and ignorance as a picture of the condition of our nature. Imagine mankind as dwelling in an underground cave." End quote. The allegory contains many forms of symbolism used to instruct the reader in the nature of perception. The cave represents superficial physical reality. It also represents ignorance, as those in the cave live accepting what they see at face value. Ignorance is further represented by the darkness that engulfs them because they cannot know the true objects that form the shadows, leading them to believe the shadows are the true forms of the objects. The chains that prevent the prisoners from leaving the cave represent that they are trapped in ignorance, as the chains are stopping them from learning the truth. The shadows cast on the wall of the cave represent the superficial truth, which is the illusion that the prisoners see in the cave. The freed prisoner represents those who understand that the physical world is only a shadow of the truth, and the sun that is glaring in the eyes of the prisoners represents the higher truth of ideas. The light further represents wisdom, as even the paltry light that makes it in the cave allows the prisoners to know shade. Plato's Phaedo contains similar imagery to that of the allegory of the cave. As if a philosopher recognizes that before philosophy his soul was, and I quote, a veritable prisoner fast bound within his body, and that instead of investigating reality of itself and in itself, is compelled to peer through the bars of a prison, end quote. The image of the cave as an allegory of knowledge is also present in Edward Forster's work, A Passage to India. The trip to the fictitious Maraba cave, central in the novel, is performed by three main characters in the story: Dr. Aziz, Mrs. Moore, and Miss Della Questid, in an almost sacred and mysterious silence, and recalls the concept of cave theorized by Plato. Aziz and the women explore the caves. In the first cave, Mrs. Moore is overcome with claustrophobia, but worse than claustrophobia is the echo, which begins at the Maraba cave. First, Mrs. Moore and then Adela hear the echo and are haunted by it in the weeks to come. The Maraba caves are, and I quote, readily described: a tunnel 8 feet long, 5 feet high, 3 feet wide, leads to a circular chamber about 20 feet in diameter. This arrangement occurs again and again throughout the group of hills, and this is a Maraba cave, unquote. The case represent all that is alien about nature, and this alien quality has the power to make visitors such as Mrs. Moore and Adela confront parts of themselves or the universe that they have not previously recognized. The all-reducing echo of the case, for example, causes Mrs. Moore the darkest side of her spirituality, a waning commitment to the world of relationships and growing ambivalence about God. In this sense, the case both destroy meaning in reducing all utterances to the same sound and expose or narrate the unspeakable, the aspects of the universe that the case visitors have not yet considered. Stereotyping and Orientalist thought is also explored in post-colonial critics, and Edward Said suggesting both culture and imperialism and Orientalism, that Forster deals with the question of British India relationships by separating Muslim and Hindus in the narrative. He says Forster connects Islam to Western values and attitudes, while suggesting that Hinduism is chaotic and orderless, and subsequently uses Hindu characters as the background of the main narrative. As Benita Paris suggests, and I quote, a Hindu-Muslim entente is forged and in the association between Aziz and the descendant of the Mughals who had fought the British invaders, and Godbol, whose Maratha ancestors had defended an independent Deccan against the foreign onslaught, the novel alludes to the growth of an Indian nationalism, attracting protagonists to share different memories of armed struggles against the British conquest. As a result, this journey to the Maraba caves, as well as to India, can be seen as a form of atonement for the characters who manage to get to know the most intimate parts of themselves through the confrontation with the unknown, or rather with the other. In Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, Malo comes to the Congo for the development of his experience and self, in the belief that a man is shaped by what he does and that the character is formed by what happens to him. But surrounding all of man's effort in the Congo, there is a presence which can be referred to the darkness of alterity that characters comes to be facing. Kurt listened to it and went mad, and Malo recognizes it but refuses to listen, neutralizes the appeal of the unknown, and survives Kurt, who succumbed to the fascinating wilderness, and I quote, and this also, said Malo suddenly, has been one of the dark places of the earth. He was the only man of us who still followed the sea. The worst that could be said of him was that he did not represent his class. He was a seaman, but he was a wanderer too, while most seamen lead, if one may so express it, a sedentary life. This can also be compared to the echo present at the Maraba Caves and had by Mrs. Boraziz and Mr. de la Quested. The surname of Adela also suggests the quest of the self, just as in Malo's case. However, Adela decides to accept this quest, the contact with alterity, whilst Malo refuses it, and in the end, he does not understand the meaning of his experience at the beginning of his narrative. As a result, it is possible to compare Kurt's approach to the present to Adela's one with the echo of the Maraba Caves, whilst Malo's approach is relatable to Mrs. Morse, who decides to escape from the caves as soon as she hears the echo. As Anne Hawkins points out, and I quote, in Out of Darkness, Malo is essentially sympathetic to the Africans. Although using the language of his time, he calls them niggers and savages. He feels that, unlike the imperialists, they wanted no excuse for being there. It is them as prehistoric, but he recognizes their humanity like yours. So, in Out of Darkness, Heart of Darkness can be seen as a journey, Malo's mythical journey, in search for the self to bring back a new truth. Throughout the novel, the main character relates his experiences journeying up the Congo River in quest of another white man, Kurtz. This enigmatic man had been received by the natives as if he were a god, but perhaps because he had gone into the jungle without knowing himself and unprepared for the ordeal awaiting him. His misconduct takes him beyond the limits of his art. Thus, he is punished with madness and death. On the contrary, Malo does not transgress his limits and comes back without fully understanding his experience. Although the higher darkness tries to exercise its influence on him too, he is able to restrain himself by recognizing its fascination and abomination, and by resisting his desire to join those unspeakable rites. Malo is sad because his aim is self-knowledge, the mystery of existence, which demands a great humility. In conclusion, all these four characters, Malo, Kurtz, Adela Quested, and Mrs. Moore, can be schemed in a sort of literary chiasmus, in which the point of contact where the two axes encounter is the point of cultural alterity through which all the characters have passed. As Friedman points out, and I quote, the new geography figures identity as a historically embedded side, a crossroads of multiply situated knowledges. It articulates not the organic unfolding of identity, but rather the mapping of territories and boundaries, the contact zone, end quote. And this contact zone of which Friedman talks about is where the characters find the real knowledge, that inner balance that helps them demystify false beliefs about the world, but mostly about themselves. Unlike those who truly confront or at least acknowledge Africa and the darkness within themselves, so by making l'Admiral's salto mortale, Marlowe does not die, but unlike the company man who focus only on morning advancement, Marlowe suffers horribly. He is thus contaminated by the experiences and memories. And I quote, however, as you see, I did not go to join my Kurtz there and then, and to show my loyalty to Kurtz once more. Destiny, my destiny, droll thing life is, that mysterious arrangement of merciless logic for a futile purpose. The most you can hope from it, it is some knowledge of yourself that comes too late, a crop of indistinguishable regrets, end quote. As a result, Marlowe here states that the only knowledge we can achieve is the inner one, the one that would eventually be a means of inner balance. But the recognition of the need of this knowledge is only possible when facing the contact to go deep into the heart of that immense darkness in which the bridge is alterity. These are my references, and thank you for the attention.